Forex inflow through the Central Bank of Nigeria reaches $6.97 billion in 3 months. Oil steady after U.S. Capitol protests and tighter supplies in focus. And the program this morning focuses on the one-week-old AFCFTA. These and more on Business Express reaching you from Abuja, Nigeria's capital. My name is Liakatun Babatunde. The third quarter economic report of the CBN shows that foreign exchange inflow through the Central Bank of Nigeria in the third quarter of 2020 reached $6.97 billion. The report shows that during the period under review, aggregate foreign exchange inflow through the CBN stood at $6.97 billion, a decrease of 30.7% and 43.6% below the levels in the second quarter of 2020 and the corresponding quarter of 2019. The development was attributed to a decline in both oil and non-oil receipts by 9.7% and 44.7% below the levels in the preceding quarter and corresponding quarter of 2019. The CBN said the decrease in non-oil receipts followed reversion to normal trend after the one-off IMF facility in the previous quarter, while that of oil receipts was as a result of the weak global demand for crude oil, owing to fragile global economic recovery. Further analysis of non-oil receipts showed that interbank swaps, other official receipts, and TSA and third-party receipts increased by 255.6%, 40.4%, and 6.8% to $1.6 billion, $0.99 billion, and $0.95 billion over their respective levels in the second quarter of 2020. Oil prices rose on Thursday as Saudi Arabia, the world's biggest exporter, unilaterally agreed to cut output over the next 2 months and as U.S. crude stockpiles fell. Analysts say it is not immediately clear how the storming of the U.S. Capitol by supporters of President Donald Trump will impact oil markets, although some analysts believe President-elect Joe Biden's administration will clamp down on U.S. oil production. Brent crude was up 40 cents or 0.7% at $54.7 a barrel after gaining 1.3% overnight. U.S. West Texas Intermediate gained 43 cents or 0.9% to $51.06. Saudi Arabia, the world's biggest oil exporter, said it would voluntarily cut 1 million barrels per day of output in February and March. Now to the business of the day. Ifeanyi Okoye is actually standing by on Zoom, and he is the Managing Director, Juhel Nigeria Limited. He joins me to look at some fundamentals in the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. You're welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
Now, the AFCFTA was initially set to take off mid-last year, but of course, coronavirus came and changed the whole arrangements. Now we're here. What is the place of pharmaceuticals in the development of the African trade scheme?
You agree with me that Africa is still under serious development generally, and the pharmaceutical business is still at the embryonic stage in this continent. And the most important thing is that we are moving forward. By 2017, when the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement was first mooted, the size of the pharmaceutical business in Africa was about 28.5 billion, which is a step. That's about 2017 when this idea was mooted. But far back, a decade ago, 10 years back, it was only about 5.5 billion US dollars, which means we are moving forward. And there is hope. We are now we've just come out of 2020, and it's projected that by 2020, it will get up to at least 40 to 65 billion US dollars. And now we are here. The implementation just started less than a week ago, or just a week ago. And I will tell you that because of the coronavirus, everybody is still watching each other. Movement hasn't actually started the way it should be. And you know as well as I do that the pharmaceutical business is fully involved in coronavirus fight. The Nigerian government showed that by trying to support them to get this sorted out. So for now, the African pharmaceutical market is growing very, very fast.
Okay.
In fact, in Africa has a place where you actually expect the serious growth of pharmaceutical business in the world.
Okay, great. You're also a manufacturer. Now, how would you describe the takeoff of the AFCFTA, and are you also transacting? What are the early notes?
Currently, like I said, we're just starting. African Continental Free Trade Agreement is something that is expected to make business better, have more people employed, and at least with tariff restriction, people can operate without any serious restriction. But the problem is each African country has to watch each other. And these are developing nations. They don't tend to believe on what each other is saying. And this will have a lot to, it will definitely affect the takeoff seriously. But I think we are there. It has to take off.
Now, can you speak to us on the barriers before the AFCFTA and how the single market is affecting changes, if any? Have you noticed any of such?
Africa is a place where people take decisions based on the way they see it locally. You know that our customs, talking of African customs services, are not really well brushed up. There are a lot of corruptions, delays on clearing of goods, a lot of ideas developed within the country themselves. We are made up of about 54 countries, and each country has a level of practice which most you know as well as I do has to do with corruption. And some countries want to clear some of these problems through specific certifications to be able to avoid unnecessary barriers. But these certifications will definitely be followed by each country differently. And this will definitely affect this agreement. I hope you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, I do. So can you also tell us what exactly are in there for Nigerian manufacturers in terms of challenges, in terms of gains? What are the prospects out there?
You know, Nigerian manufacturers have specific problems. Originally, it was as if the Nigerian manufacturers were somehow against the agreement, but that is not true. The Nigerian manufacturers had earlier made it clear to the government that we are not fully ready for this agreement. Where you have an agreement, Nigeria has one of the highest population, and we have one of the greatest problems as far as the provision of essential infrastructures for manufacturers. You can't compare the availability of electricity in Nigeria to any of our neighboring countries. That could be due to high population, but still it's an issue. As we are talking now in Nigeria, moving items out of our ports has become a different problem altogether. There was a story last week that some manufacturers pay as much as 250,000 naira to police to remove their goods from the port.
Can you just move tighter into the shot? You're straying out. I need to see you. No, the other way, the other way. Yes, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Okay, that
Perfect,
looks better.
perfect.
So moving goods out of Nigerian ports as we are talking now is a lot of problems. People bribe to move goods out of Papa ports to their factories to be able to manufacture. And then the insecurity, of course, nobody will be able to run a manufacturing outfit without being secured. Currently, we provide our security in our industries in this country. You know that very, very well. And then, of course, the high interest rate on funds we borrow also affects us a lot. This is one of the key reasons why it's as if the manufacturers are saying, let's wait, get these things stabilized, get these things clear before we get involved in this agreement. But it's good we are there, and we have a strong hope that the government knows what we have been complaining and are working towards clearing them. Because if that is not done, I'll tell you, Nigeria will lose out completely from this agreement.
Okay, now before I let you go, you've of course highlighted some of the issues confronting manufacturers. In just maybe one or two sentences, can you just tell us what steps in details you expect to be taken by those
The government officials?
Yeah, sure.
And what we are saying is, let's get our infrastructure stabilized. Let's have electricity. I will tell you, nobody complains about the cost of electricity. The way they are doing it now is not the way it should be done. Before you start increasing costs and all that, get the electricity available. So if the government can provide electricity, definitely they have put the line straight for a manufacturer. You don't have to compete with all other African countries when you have to provide electricity yourself, provide the security yourself, which I think these things are simply the job of the government.
Thank you very much.
And then in terms of availability of affordable funds, these are, some countries have gone up to 1%. I mean, single digit as interest rates. And here in Nigeria, we're actually talking about 2025. And we are coming out to compete with this same country, with other Africans on the African Continental Free Trade Area.
Okay, thank you.
I think
this is the much we can take in this conversation for now. We hope to get you back some other time. I've been speaking with Ifeanyi Okoye, and he is the Managing Director of Juhel Nigeria Limited. Thank you for coming on the program.
Thank you very much, Babatunde.
Thank you. Now, in our Surviving a COVID-19 series, today we bring you the story of a digital printer, Bello Bisela, who offers special printing services, and he talks to us about his experience.
Surviving COVID-19 series is brought to you in partnership with the Central Bank of Nigeria.
Printing is such a business that requires physical presence. So basically, if you, the operator of the printing press, is not there, as in if you're not physically there at times to ensure production goes on, there's virtually nothing you can do. number one challenge was the increase in the cost of consumables for us, which we had to tackle. And then number two also was getting customers back, because as a result of COVID, a lot of customers had either moved on, or some of them had moved to other service providers who could provide services for them. It was normal before COVID. During COVID, business was negative. We had to learn to do business in a new way. And post-COVID, we're also adapting to several ways of doing business. Yeah, we heard about the CBN Ask Mice through NISAL MFB, and we're basically a beneficiary. It wasn't difficult because we provided all the needed information online, and we got the support from the federal government.
Surviving COVID-19 series is brought to you in partnership with the Central Bank of Nigeria.
And still with the AfCFTA, which is taking off, intra-African trade is expected to grow by 33%, and Africa's total trade deficit is expected to be cut in half. Let's take this discussion between Vera Sangwe, the Executive Secretary of the Economic Commission for Africa, and Benny Adams.
Welcome on Business Express, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. Happy New Year, and thanks for having me.
Okay, let's start this way. To the ordinary citizen, what does the commencement of the Africa Continental Free Trade Pact mean for Nigeria and Africa at large?
Thank you again. Happy New Year to all those listening to us, and hope you're keeping safe. Let me start with that point about keeping safe. The reality of our environment today is that we are all suffering from COVID-19. Africa's growth may fall from about 3.1% to 0 in 2021 if we're not careful, which will mean that we have an additional 5 to 29 million people that will fall into extreme poverty. So this for us economically is the big challenge of 2021. It is, how does Africa grow out of this? How do we ensure that we can put in place policies, systems, and investments and jobs that will help us grow out of the crisis and ensure that we are able to meet the challenges of Agenda 2030 and Agenda, of course, 2063, the African Union agenda, which is of a continent that we want. And that's where the AfCFTA, or the African Continental Free Trade Area agreement, comes into play. Because what it intends to do, what it stands to do, and I always say that, is that it is Africa's investment blueprint. It is a proposition for Africa to see how we create more jobs, and not just jobs. Normally when we talk about some of this, highfalutin ideas, they're really for the rich, they're for the wealthy, they're for the big businesses. This is something that really starts with, the lady who does cross-border trade, and we know that almost 60% of our trade on the continent is cross-border trade done by women in the agricultural sector. So when we start talking about the AfCFTA, we are talking about we're talking about the regular people who are doing business on the continent and what that will mean for them. The AfCFTA, if we do it well, if we put in place the policies, and we're very, very grateful that Nigeria is with us in this journey, the AfCFTA can boost intra-Africa exports from about 20 to 30%. This is equivalent to somewhere in the order of $43 billion. Imagine $43 billion in a time of crisis being injected into our economies. I think this is what we're talking about. In what areas is this going to work? It is mostly, again, I said, agriculture, cross-border trade. A lot of the women, I'm from Cameroon, you guys are in Nigeria, there's a lot of trade going on. It's not happening with big business, it's happening with small and medium enterprise women.
Okay, talking about doing it well, are we in a good state as a country to compete favorably under the African continental market?
I think if by we you mean Nigeria can certainly do better. I think one of the conversations that we've been having on the CFTA for a long time is the diversification of Nigeria's trade. Nigeria today trades with Africa on in a number of fronts, but most of it is still oil, it's still petroleum products. 82% of Nigeria's total imports from the region are in the petroleum and a little bit of the agriculture sector. The top exports that Nigeria does to ECOWAS, again, petroleum products, tobacco, and maybe a little bit of manufacturing. Of course, we're very grateful because there is cement and some plastering materials that are in that. Nigeria is among the top 5 importers from Africa, but again, it is also especially petroleum products, and I think this is the conundrum for Nigeria, right? It's petroleum products out, petroleum products in. Can Nigeria diversify more? Can Nigeria do better? And let me just give you a sense of what the AFCFTA could do with a country like Nigeria. Nigeria has identified, and this is what the Economic Commission for Africa is doing with Nigeria. We've been working with Nigeria. We're very grateful to the government of Nigeria, to the policymakers in Nigeria, the Minister of Trade and Industry, but more importantly, to the Nigerian Manufacturers Association, because we've worked with them to identify 35 priority products that have a potential market outside of Nigeria, 25 products that Nigeria is doing today. These 25 products, a cost for the continent somewhere in the order of $38 billion. And Nigeria is not in those markets, is not playing in the way it should. Iron and steel, for example. The iron and steel market on the continent is 28 billion. Nigeria only accounts for 220 million of that market. Plastics. Nigeria could do a lot more. Nigeria is already in the oil and refinery. We know that plastics is a byproduct. Plastics is a $17 billion market on the continent. Nigeria is only there in that market for 850 billion. These are things that the continent is exporting from outside of the region, which we believe Nigeria can do better with. Chemicals, again, a byproduct of the petroleum sector, $10 billion market. Nigeria is in it for 200 million. Fisheries, the fisheries sector, 4.3 billion market. Nigeria is in it for 500 million. So I think if you start looking at sort of what is Nigeria's share in what we're doing as a continent and how much Nigeria can include in that market, you begin to see. So let's take an example, cement. Nigeria is already doing very well. It's a 2.9 billion market, and Nigeria already has 600 million of that market. So
okay, looking at the strength Nigeria has got in this market and the fact that manufacturing is key, do you foresee unhealthy trade competition among African countries, looking at our area of advantage, area of strength, as well as the French-speaking countries?
I don't see unhealthy competition. I mean, I've just given you this list of things that Nigeria can do, which I think actually for a lot of these markets, we're importing from outside the region. And I think this is the point of the AFCFTA. The AFCFTA is to say $2.9 billion cement market, where Africa is importing almost almost 1.9 billion of cement from outside the region, outside the continent. Can we do better? Can we trade with ourselves? Can Nigeria be, as you already are, for the continent, one of the giants in the cement sector? Can you do more? Can you do better? On the plastic side. So I don't think that there is unhealthy competition. What we are actually saying, and what we hope the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement will do, is to take the best of us and add value across the value chain on the continent, so that when we start exporting, we are actually exporting more value-added goods, we're creating more jobs on the continent, and we're ensuring that prosperity is not prosperity that is exported, but it is actually prosperity that is created on the continent. So a lot of work has gone on the rules of origin, and we have, as to date, 90% of agreement on the rules of origin, which is a huge effort. Considering where we began. We're hoping that by, if not February, certainly by June 2021, there will be full agreement on the rules of origin, which I think is where there has been some tensions around, how much do we bring into the continent? What is the competition that the CFTA is going to provide?
Let's take a look at tariffs. What would tariffs and customs procedures be like under the single market?
Now, that's a very good question. And I think one of the things that we've been talking about for a very long time is about actually not so much the tariffs part, but the non-tariffs part. But just so that I give you some numbers on the tariffs part, the AFCFTA is planning to reduce tariff barriers, which are about 6.9% now across Africa. We're trying to bring them to zero. So all those tariffs will come down to zero on some issues. But the more importantly, I think, what the AFCFTA wants to do is look at non-tariff barriers, regulatory means alignment. border controls, border checks, divergences in sanitary and phytosanitary standards and technical standards, agreement on the harmonization of e-commerce. That, I think, is actually where the winner for Africa on the CFTA is going to be. So yes, the tariff barrier is 6.9% across Africa on average. We hope that with the CFTA, that is going to go away. But the non-tariff barriers, when we translate non-tariff barriers into monetary terms, it's about 14.3% cost. So really, that's what we want to address. And you will see Wamkele Mene now, the Secretary General of the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement Secretariat in Ghana, talking about, the first point of call is really to start doing this one border control points, so that we can begin to break down a lot of the, we did a piece of work just with COVID that showed that people need sometimes 600 pieces of paper to cross, if you want to do trade between one border and the other. This is huge. Oh, I think we went down again.
Now, that was a discussion between Benny Adams and Vera Songwe, the Executive Secretary of the ECA. Now, news just reaching us say the U.S. Congress has released certified votes making Joe Biden the official elected president of the United States. And stocks in the Nigerian stock market made a rebound midweek after profit-taking on heavy caps dragged down the market gauges Tuesday in the first decline in weeks. At the end of the Wednesday's session, the all-share index advanced marginally by 0.17% to settle at 40,465.15 basis points. Equity capitalization at the close of the session also stood at 21.158 trillion naira. Volume of trade was 249 million, valued at 2.184 billion naira in 6,090 deals. Japan Gold and Virtues Limited led the activity chart, and of course trade is resuming on that note this morning. And from the global market, we bring to you reports and happenings fueled, of course, by the actions of protesters at the capital just yesterday. Bosti Abel brings that report.
European stocks are expected to open higher on Thursday, following a projected win for Democrats in the U.S. Senate, following dramatic scenes as demonstrators stormed the U.S. Capitol building. London's FTSE opening 38 points higher at 6,889, Germany's DAX 23 points higher at 13,938, and France's CAC 40 up 8 points at 5,652. Stocks in Asia were higher in Thursday trade after Dow Jones Industrial Average surged to an all-time high overnight, despite unrest in Washington. Nikkei topped 1.6%, Shanghai Composite 0.71%, while the Hang Seng Index dipped 0.13%. U.S. stock futures rose in overnight trading on Wednesday as investors digested the likely event of Democratic-held Congress and continued to look past riots at the U.S. Capitol. Dow Jones Industrial Average futures rose 125 points. S&P 500 futures gained 0.6% and Nasdaq 100 futures added 0.9%. While South Africa's JSE Africa Top 40, Nairobi's all-share, and Namibia's overall index started early trade on the rise in Africa.
And with that, we anchor here. Business Express returns tomorrow at 3 p.m. Be safe out there. My name is Leah Katung. Baba Tunde.